Ladies and gentlemen, our first plenary session, Resilient Cities, Resilient Futures, Building Climate Resilient Communities, is about to begin. In this session, we will explore how we can make our cities stronger, more adaptable, and better prepared to face the challenges of a changing climate. We will discuss what it means for a city to be climate resilient, the key challenges and opportunities we face, and strategies for building resilience in our communities. Please join me in welcoming our panelists, speakers, and moderator to the stage. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator for this session, Engineer Ashwin Turairaja, Executive Director, Green RE, Sendirian Berhad. The stage is yours, Engineer Ashwin.
Okay, thank you to the MC. Very good morning, everyone. Thank you to MIM for inviting me today. I am the Executive Director of Green RE, Sendirian Berhad. We are a green building certification body in Malaysia. Now, our session today is titled Resilient Cities, Resilient Futures, Building Climate Resilient Communities, centered around the theme of shared responsibility towards creating a greener future in Malaysia. Now, the topic of climate change needs no introduction. The science is clear that human-induced emissions of greenhouse gases is leading to adverse climate change. Whilst we struggle to mitigate our emissions, we must equally plan for adaptation and resilience to our changing climate. Even if we stop all excess carbon emissions today, it will take decades before our planet self-corrects. In fact, the temperature rise scenarios put forward by UN climate models cannot conclude with certainty that we have not crossed the point of no return. As we struggle to balance the competing forces of politics, economics, and science, we must keep a firm eye on the core benefits of dealing with climate change. Sustainability is not a new concept. It is aligned to our basic societal aims to improve our quality of living generation after generation. So how will climate change affect our health and well-being? How will it affect the buildings we work, play, and live in? How will it impact our food security? Today, we have an esteemed panel of high-caliber women who are tirelessly working to give us solutions to these problems. Each will have 10 minutes to present, followed by a panel discussion. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Ms. Sri Husnaini Sofyan first. She is the co-chair of the World Urban Campaign of the United Nations Human Settlements Program, UN Habitat. Ms. Sri Husnaini Sofyan has over 30 years experience working on good governance, ICT e-governance, regional global coordination of women's network in cities, managing and programming sustainable development and gender equality projects funded by the United Nations agencies. She is a member of UN Habitat's advisory group on gender issues and the co-chair of UN Habitat's World Urban Campaign. Ms. Sri Husnaini, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning. Thank you for inviting me. Actually, I'm replacing one of the speaker that MIM initially invited, who is the Secretary General of AEROF. So I'm very grateful to be with you today. Let me start by saying that when we talk about resilient cities, resilient futures, building climate resilient communities, who is the center of this? It's the human being. It's us. Yeah? So I'm going to share with you, maybe all of you already know about the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals. And because you are all the managers, you are all the expert in your own organization, in your own institution, I'm sure you are already building some point and some action into your everyday work, into your strategic plan, into contributing for a resilient, sustainable Malaysia. So I come with the perspective of a global regional policies that our government have signed on. Sometimes we know our representative, our government goes to attend all these global policies, but then we don't know, or we are not really aware of the commitment that they make. Because if we know about their commitment, we can also monitor the implementation. We can also make sure that the policies that our decision makers, that our policy makers are making align to that commitment, as well as be giving benefit to us, yeah? Because it's us, we elect them. So we the people, like in the UN, we said, we the people. So it's us, this country is ours, yeah? So let me start with what the United Nations Human Settlement Program. It's the United Nations agencies that have the mandate to implement and monitor SDG 11, which is Sustainable Cities and Communities. And this topic actually comes in the center of that SDG, but also when we talk about cities, it actually relates to all the 17 SDGs. Yeah? So we have a campaign in the UN Habitat we call the World Urban Campaign. And I hope that by the end of this, many of you will join, because we do have members from Malaysia. And membership is by institution, organization, but also individuals. Yeah? So within the World Urban Campaign, we have what we call the city we need now. And we, the members of the World Urban Campaign, which is right now over 300 organizations and institutions, some of them are national-based, many are regional and global-based. So in all, the membership is over 1 million people who are part of this. So the 10 action areas have 10 principles, and I will share with you each principle, each action are actually related to many SDGs. So when we talk about cities, even though there is one SDG, yeah, one Sustainable Development Goals with 5 targets, but actually our everyday life to make sure that we have a resilient cities is not just about making sure that we link with the climate. The climate is like an umbrella for all of us. Yeah? So let me share. The first one is health and well-being. Yeah? Because this is very important, because when we talk about climate, we want to make sure that it is actually impacting our health and well-being. And here, the principle is we want our cities to be healthy and promote well-being. And the SDG that relates to that is SDG 2, SDG 3, and SDG 11. This, because when we talk about building resilience and our future, the climate, like I mentioned earlier, is the umbrella. But without action in this SDG, we will not have what we call a resilient future. Yeah? And the building a climate resilient communities as well, because each one of us need to take action, be part of the change maker, be part of the change agent. So the second one is peace and safety. And here we talk about, making sure that we are free from violence, we foster culture and peace. And the SDG related 16, peace, justice, and strong institution, 11, sustainable cities and communities, partnership, which is very important, and also quality education, because also through our education, we put the mindset that we want to have peace and security. Then about the third action area is climate adaptation and resilience. Here, we're talking about low carbon, adapts to climate change, and the related SDG. There are 5 related SDG, climate change itself, and climate change and climate SDG 11, as we speak now, is in New York. They're discussing and reviewing the progress made on SDG 11, because this year, at the high-level political forum, which started yesterday, they're talking and countries are reporting, and our minister is there to also present. So, you know, as we sit here talking about this, we have our policymaker in New York also making presentation. And do we know what they present? I hope we know and we contribute to that report and presentation, yeah? So SDG 15, life on land. 12, responsible consumption and production, which is very important, because without responsibility, without knowing what we are consuming, what we are producing, the production that we contribute to our environment, we are not going to make to have a resilient future that, you know, we take care of our environment. Clean water and sanitation, and of course SDG 11. Then number 4, inclusion and gender equality. It's very important. Women make up 50% of all population. And I'm very glad today that our experts are all women. Normally, you know, I'll be the only woman and then 4 men. But kali ni reverse lah pula, yeah? Which is good. Congratulations to MIM for making sure that, you know, I mean, having this panel with more women. So here we promote inclusive and gender equality, where poverty, SDG 1, SDG 4, SDG 5, gender equality itself, and then SDG 10, reduce inequalities, and of course SDG 11. Yeah? The 5th action area is economic opportunity for all. So without having an economically vibrant nation that provides opportunities for all, we are also not going to have a resilient, climate resilient communities. Yeah? Because when we don't have enough, people will, you know, discriminately, you know, abuse the environment. So we must make sure that there's no poverty, there is zero hunger, there's decent work and economic growth, and of course, you know, then it will contribute to making sure that we have sustainable cities and communities. The 6th action area is culture and identity. Here we have to have a strong sense of place and room for diverse identity. So Malaysia is actually very, very lucky. We have a diverse identity only with respect to each other, that we work with each other, we can prosper. So make sure that, you know, we jagalah this diverse identity, respect each other and our culture, because it makes us stronger. And that contributes very well to building a resilient communities. Number 7, action area 7, is local governance. Here we want to make sure that we manage through public participation and democratically governed system and institution. SDG 16, peace, justice and strong institution. 17, partnership. Of course 11, and also SDG 10, reduce inequality. Action number 8, urban planning and design. This is very important. This is the basic as well. But when we talk about urban planning and design, we have to think more than the structure, more than the spatial planning, but the human being who are going to live there. Yeah? So we have to foster comprehensive integrated planning and development, best if we can do it through participatory planning. Yeah? And here we talk about, we look at the SDG 11, of course. 9, building resilient structure 12, responsible consumption and production, and of course, climate action. And action 9, housing, services, and mobility. So when we build houses, we must make sure that they have the required services along with it, and also making sure that, think about how the people who live in those houses, in those homes, will be mobile, their transportation, and so on, because that's also the key to ensure that, we have a resilient climate communities, always aware about what they're contributing, what they're doing, and so on. So the related SDG is 11, 6, 7, and 9. Last but not least, and this is very important, learning and innovation. You have to always have this mindset. Jangan suka, oh, saya sudah bagus, I'm already good, I don't have to go anywhere. But knowledge and learning, innovation, through acquiring new knowledge, being inquisitive, is important in making sure that we look at different possibilities, respecting the different knowledge that even comes from indigenous people, to make sure that we have a resilient society. Yeah. And the SDG that related to that, 11 and 4. But I'm just making a very concrete or simplistic related SDG, but actually all SDG are related to each other, and without a collective action, we are not going to go where we are. Yeah? I think what next? Yeah. So I come also and I work with an organization, a global women organization called the Huairu Commission. And we support grassroots group. And this is, I just want to share with you a model, a resilient model that the organization that I work with use to create a mindset for change. Yeah? First is to support and strengthen local organizing and leadership. So when we work with people, we have to always work with people, and we're not working with just building. We work with people, and people, the human being, are the most important. So we have to nurture, support, and finance and resource local organizing and leadership. What do you call that? Resident association, for example, is very key to actually making sure that we have the resilient community, yeah? And then nurture knowledge and good practices. Many of you are holding position to decide where the corporate social responsibility funding goes. So invest in something that are sustainable and building, bukan charitable form, but building knowledge, building gender just and resilient development mindset to the people themselves also. So, and you partner with them, bukan I work with them, bukan I work for them, I work with the people, I work with the community. Yeah? And building constituencies, alliance, network, and partnership. So, if you are in a certain industries, you build alliances with also laterally and vertically, because that's important, because we rely on each other. We are not living alone. Yeah? And also it's very good to also build alliances, for example, with the Persatuan Kerajaan local government, the local government institution. At the global level, we have the United Cities Local Government, UCLG, yeah, United Cities and Local Government, and they have a chapter in Malaysia. So work with them, because they are also the custodian to ensure that we are building and maintaining or strengthening our resilience towards climate change and adapt. And last but not least, in influence and change public policy processes, participate and give input. Yeah. So so I invite all of you, ni advertisement sikit lah. to join the World Urban Campaign. There's the website. And if you want to be an individual member, you can be a city changer. Yeah? Thank you very much, and I hope this is useful for a big overall umbrella presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Husnaidi, for giving us a good overview of UN Habitat's action areas and linkage to the SDGs. Next, we have architect Dr. Serena Hijaz, who is a council member of Climate Governance Malaysia. She is one of the leading and earliest proponents on sustainable design in Malaysia, starting from energy efficiency to sustainability through to zero carbon emission. She is the principal creative director at Hijaz Architects and Planners and is known for changing the building landscape of architecture through buildings that are responsive, energy conscious, and bold. For the past 13 years, she served in the Green Building Index Accreditation Panel and is currently the president of the Malaysia Green Building Council. Over to you, Architect Serena.
Hi. Very good morning to you. When we were given this topic, I was a little bit scared that I would do justice. I think Ashwin knows me quite well. We've both been in the green building for some time. And so I've had a great passion with regards to cities and greening our cities, but greening not just in terms of the building. So maybe this will come across that, some of my background in terms of green building, but actually it's going to segue quite a bit. There is some information on the internet that you can have a look on Think City on the heat island effects of our cities. Actually, I've been doing this for the past 20 years, both monitoring the ppm in the air as well as on the ground, just out of curiosity. But I think what this brings to us is quite important, and I think there's nothing, I'm a visual person, so I have to actually explain things visually. So this is 2005. 3 cities have been studied with regards to the urban heat island. So you can see that the lowest temperature measured was about 18 degrees at that time, and the surface temperature was about, at the hottest would be about 27.9 or 28 degrees. And this was in 2005. In 2018, you can see the increase of temperature. 34 degrees, 34.64 and 19.16. When we get cool days, we're really, amazed, blue skies, and it's kind of cool. And I think if you look at this, you'll understand 2 things. One is urbanization, and that urbanization is going to continue. So we talk about climate change, but we also have to talk about urbanization in terms of our cities. And the impact of that urbanization is temperature rising, because there's a lot of buildings, there's less green, there's hot island effects, and while Singapore is purporting, the 7 degrees, 5 to 7 degree change, when my first job doing Telecom Malaysia, we had our own professor who was doing the studies, and he told me it was 3 to 5 degrees at that time. Now we're measuring 5 to 7 degrees change, and this is without the climate change of 1.5 degrees, which of course we are already measuring 1.5 at Bayan La Paz, by the way. So areas that are close to water are going to feel the heat the most, as islands, and Singapore is one of them, of course. But in cities, as they grow dense, we are also going to get this problem. And so we've seen an increase. This data is 6 years old. It's 6.7 degrees. And I hate to think that at 2024, we're probably rising to a little bit higher than that. And you might think a 1 degree change is not going to make a lot of difference, but it's making a lot of difference. So I'm showing you this at a macro level, and then I want to talk about the micro level later on. So we talked about the umbrella of climate. There is no umbrella that's going to cover us in terms of in the tropics. We're going to see humidity rise and heat stress. I also follow where the water lines are also going to increase, so new developments have to be quite savvy that they are taking care of the 1.5 degrees right now. So lands that have to be raised by 1 meter at least around the perimeters and low areas. That temperature is going to create more urban heat island. We're going, as we are already seeing the droughts and the floods, we already saw an emergency in Sarawak with regards to water in Balikpapan this year. Biodiversity loss, which we all think we have abundance. Also water, we think that we have abundance, and we are the highest users of water in the world, at 220 liters per person in a country that is only 30 million. And that's because we always think we have a lot of water. So all of these are going to affect us, notwithstanding that, of course, in our cities, the amount of cars, and I like that the mayor of London and Datin Sunita asked me to sort of speak a little bit about that, is that, you know, we can in our cities make certain changes. In Jakarta, every odd day, only even cars can travel and not odd cars can travel. Only green cars with electricity use can actually travel any day. And that's to cut down the number of traffic coming in and to cut down the emissions of nitric into the air. So climate change, and I want to add the word urbanization, is affecting our cities and communities. And a proponent of what we do at the Green Building Council is basically cooler environments, cooler buildings means cooler cities. So when we see heat mappings like this, and this is where data is going to be very, very important in terms of us collating it. And I'm not quite sure, I don't know enough in Malaysia, because I think a lot of us, we tend to work in our own silos. And this topic that you gave me actually opened up my silo to a much bigger realm. So thank you very much for that. Because it's a learning, I take every talk that we give as a sort of learning, and then what can we do about it. So the heat mapping gives us, you know, it's the energy that's generated by the buildings, vehicles, surrounding areas. And I'm just showing you, you know, whilst we start to cut down our trees in our cities, and of course they're falling down now because of harsh climate, that the temperature difference can be as much as 7 degrees in the shade. So trees are very, very important, but the buildings also, and that's why there's this urgency to sort of push for the idea of green buildings to lower this and create cooler buildings in our environment. I'm very excited to see that finally Kuala Lumpur is through Malaysian Nature Society, I'm going to talk about the micro again, has this 3-year project underway to create networks and ecological pathways through our city. We need that. We need to start greening our environment and bringing it through. Other cities and other studies under resilient cities are doing it, like in Colombia, they're bringing these, what they call 33 green corridors through the city in order trying to cool it. And desperately, Singapore is also working at this and creating what they call, which we haven't started to impose, the green plot ratio. That means for every plot that you build, you put a green roof on top of it, or you replace the amount of green. And I think actually this is going to be the way forward. So this is where we need to work together with our cities to create that. On a very, very smaller scale, and I think this is going to give you the importance of dealing with this at a micro level. This year, CAN CGM gave a small sponsorship to two worthy NGOs. And I want to bring light to the second NGO that we did give in and talk about the role of NGOs in accelerating communities and resilient communities. So at a cities level, we can deal on it on a very kind of big level, and we need to make these broad changes, but they're taking a bit more time than both of us have been in these green buildings for the past, I don't know, mine's about 25, 30 years, but in 10 years I haven't seen the change move fast enough. But in Club Alami, for example, I want to bring this importance of the impact. So we have impact to our cities, but we will have impact to our food, water, resources. And so at a big scale, we need to look at that in terms of our food source. Fishing is one that has been really going to be hit. The pH level in the water, when I show it to you, means nothing until you know that the acidity level is changing as well as the flow of the water is changing. And that's going to impact our fisheries. So this small project here, not a project, it's actually an NGO working, is climate change impacts on Malaysian communities and community empowerment on habitat conservation. That means we are working together with those communities. And our seagrass meadows is one of the big impacts and areas. Seagrass basically is where fish can have nutrients, will grow. So building resilience for communities in coastal areas of Malaysia is going to be quite important work. And it should not just be at the NGO levels, but it actually is a national agenda. So anything that's hitting our food. So the infrastructure improvements, community engagement, environmental sustainability. So what started as just seed money giving is something that we can learn, that the community are working with communities to empower them. And to actually, what I say, NGOs are action catalysts and local communities are the accelerators for this resilience that is much, much needed. This is some of the warriors that they call Pendeka Laut, because we are also losing fishermen as they all go into urbanization. And so our food source is going to be threatened as much as anything else. Yeah, this is a presentation by Dr. Serena Raman when she presented to us, and I think it tells us at the community level what can be done. Policies are all very good, but now we are actually in the time of action. So resilience in cities is affected by urbanization, industrialization, and climate change. But resiliency of communities is affected by changing climate. Now, these are two different principles. One is we caused it in the urban cities. We did the industrialization and all the effects of it, so now we're having to deal with it. But communities didn't ask for this. The communities out there are actually having to take the brunt of the changing climates. So if there's nothing else I have not learned in seeing some of the energy in transition, building in transition, and all the rest of it, is the provision of diversification at macro and micro scales in climate adaptation solutions for land and biodiversity protection. Clean energy, water, and food source will be key to building resiliency. So we need to look at this at the big picture, and then to get close to all the micro levels of protecting our biodiversity, creating more clean energy at a faster rate. Water is going to be a source. Everyone's talking about data centers and all the rest of it, but and food source. But without even talking about data centers, we are already having, as you said, a state of an emergency in certain locations on water. And so I think if there was any parting word is that we need to work at macro and micro efforts to build resilient cities and resilient communities. And so at the cities level, what I learned in this past week preparing for this talk is that there's quite a few things that are out there already. One is Resilient Cities Network, which is under the World Economic Forum, which CAN-CGM is part of. There is a Resilient Cities Network. They're already doing work in Malacca, in Penang, and a few other states. So they are working on mini projects to build a certain resilient cities network. Data is important, and the digital urban climate twin is essentially a digital representation or copy of the physical, is going to be important for us, basically to test the solutions, to come up to the solutions at a city level. And under the World GBC, we have what we call the C40 Resilient Cities works that is being done across everywhere. There is also something called the Resilient Cities Index. Well, you know, we have an index for everything. This is actually created by Arab, but with the foundation from America. And that basically allows the cities to measure. But at the communities level, the NGOs like Malaysian Nature Society working on the corridors of green, Club Alami, and many, many others, WWF, Think City, ICLI, they are, and I will say, the biggest proponents that are going to help us because the NGOs are action catalysts, as I said before, and local communities will be, together with us, the accelerators for adaptation and resilience. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Architect Serena. I think the urban heat island effect was particularly interesting. We talk about 1.5 degrees on average globally, but you have far more extreme increases in city centers. Just a quick fact, an average human would not be able to survive more than 6 hours if your temperature is 35 degrees at 100% humidity. So dangerous times indeed. Okay, moving on to the next presenter, we have Dr. Jayanti Deesan. She's the Managing Director of Sustainability Consultancy, Obrens. Dr. Jayanti has over 20 years of experience in the area of governance and sustainability. She founded Obrens in 2012 and has wide experience working at board and senior management levels with clients and business partners from several sectors. She was previously the Executive Director of the Malaysian Centre of Regulatory Studies, University Malaya. She has a PhD in Standards of Sustainability from Queen Mary University, London. She has served as an independent non-executive director of diversified conglomerate Berjaya Corporation since 2012 and is also a member of the Board Audit Risk, Sustainability and Nomination Committees. Dr. Jayanti, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I'll try to use the podium. I do better when I stand. Right. Thank you for having me, MIM, and I learned so much from my fellow panelists. Happy to be here and talking further on ESG. We are here today, precisely at this moment, and we need to take this moment with a heavy burden because we were cleared for takeoff ESG. Essentially, am I having a double mic? Can we move this away? Yeah. Essentially cleared for takeoff due to the work of so many people, institutions and people, and organizations, regulators, Bursa Malaysia, the Stock Exchange, the Singapore Monetary Authority, Bank Negara, for example, cleared that takeoff essentially when they said ESG is part of listing requirements, it's part of climate change taxonomy, for example. That's made it clear, and I want to anchor my session in particular with what can companies do? If I'm a large company or a small company, because that's the work I do, a lot of my work is in that intersection of technology and ESG advisory. What can I do? How can I catalyze impact in a topic that's so big? ESG is big, and today we're talking about resilient communities, resilient cities. We learned so much from the other panelists in terms of the problems, the issues, and it's frankly quite scary. But what we have today, ladies and gentlemen, is a seat at the table. And I urge each one of you to leave this room today to be ESG practitioners. You may be a founder of a company, a small company. You may be an executive looking at risk, legal, accounting. It doesn't matter. But everyone needs to have an ESG lens, which is why this session is so important. This whole conference is so important. So the burden we bear, because 20 years ago when we started, and we've moved from that whole notion that we used to give a clap for a company that said, look, we really care about human rights and climate change. Now we want action. But you're going to tell me, as sustainability practitioner of a small organization perhaps, I have limited resources, I have limited people, limited knowledge and capacity. What can I do? So I'm here to leave you hopefully with your glass half full, that it's possible to actually catalyze on the moment and the innovation that can come through this transition pathway. It needs to happen, yes, they've all made it very clear, but how can we catalyze that? And I want to bring you to the man on the moon. When we set man on the moon, It was an almost, and when I look at net zero pathways when we started, it was almost like that. How can we get there? Even the largest Fortune 500 companies were struggling, much less a small SME in hinterland Perak, for example. It's a struggle. It still continues to be. But when we set man on the moon, and we did not compromise on that and land and say, look, let's focus on another lower orbit. What came out of that was not just that we managed to land man on the moon, we managed to there were so many new innovations, microprocessors, scratch helmets, lenses, I think even soles of shoes, all these things came, cordless drills, for example, came out of that innovation. So that's why it's so exciting for us to be here and talking about ESG, talking about resiliency and climate change in terms of cities and communities, because at the end, we get the cities we deserve, ladies and gentlemen. And if we don't do something about it as companies, then the cities will continue. We've got the glimpse, we've got the data. You know, really clear data in terms of heat maps, in terms of water issues, everything in terms of resource depletion is very real. Rethinking cities towards resilience needs a rethink of companies. Yeah. So I want to focus really, because of the limited time, on circularity and food security towards resilience. One of the reasons why this is particularly important, because I have a few case studies that I can share. I wanted to anchor it in real examples and not just say you can do it and you can leave this with your glass half full. That's not very useful. And ESG is like a muscle. It's not going to happen overnight. The large companies have shown us it takes years to build that ESG playbook within a company. And if you are a small company, we got a glimpse of it this morning when the minister talked about how SMEs are so important to catalyze their change. But SMEs also need focus with the limited resources. So focusing on circularity, one, and food security is perhaps a first step to look at that. Why food? By 2050, the global population explosion, 9 billion population, and 2/3 of the global middle class will be in Asia Pacific. What does this mean to cities? What does this mean to us? It continues to mean that we need to reconsider not just cities, we need to consider nature. One of the things that came out earlier was we've built cities for cars, yeah? But we've also not priced nature in how we've taken nature for free. Not just water, sunshine is free, for example. Is it really free? When it is free, what happens? We continue to when we don't continue to price nature, we continue to misuse nature. And this is where we are today in terms of food, especially the amount of pesticides in the food due to the distance. A lot of food, 60 billion ringgit imported into Malaysia in terms of food. So are we a food secure nation? I don't have the answer to that. Policymakers will need to answer that. But these are big questions to ask if we are talking about resilient cities. And the people who live and the communities who live in there, are they ready to be resilient? Okay, let me start with my first case study, Ivory Pearl, and also a nice, it's a company we worked with deep in Perak, so small company, because I will show you examples of larger companies, but the small companies are particularly interesting and exciting for me. Why? Simply because small companies are where the real change and innovation will happen and are building that real data sets that can change ESG for me. Now, Ivory Pearl, this morning there was a really good question in terms of the timber industry. So Ivory Pearl sits smacks in the heart of this timber industry. They're manufacturers of door, they use wood, right? And they didn't do a look into ESG and assess their scope 1, scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions out of the goodness of their heart. Most companies don't. They do it because customers expect them to. So the global the global suppliers, so one of those successful SMEs, global suppliers were forced to look at it. But in the process of looking at it, now this is where that big audacious goal is fundamental, right? They realized that if we start looking and rethinking of our whole value chain of the circularity of this concept that didn't exist for them before, we can start really looking at alternatives in terms of how we manufacture, how we process, and in that process look at different areas for growth, but also look at productivity and efficiency. Now this is translating that big ESG topic into very real dollars and cents for a smaller company, and it really made sense for them. So that's an example of where circularity, big concept, but when I anchor it in growth, productivity, and risk. It makes sense for a business owner. It opens up new areas, new markets, and for an ESG practitioner, that's the dream. Yeah. Boomgrow, agri-tech company that uses precision farming technology to produce clean greens, pesticide-free. Last year inducted into the Forbes 100 to watch. Now, companies like these are rethinking how we produce food, how we manufacture, how we think about circularity. Because ultimately, to build a resilient city, we need healthy, sustainable, economical, viable food systems. But we are very far from that. So how can we create solutions that enable the change will be that question. For Boomgrow, it's a company that I personally invested in because I truly believe in the mission of the company, but also 95% less water in farming. That's a major shift in terms of how we currently farm, right? And farming on site, locally produced farming means we are building resilient food systems in cities and communities. And that, if that's not change and that's not a transformation, then that's the beginning of that journey of building that ESG muscle and seeding ESG across different companies in different ways. So this is an example of how 2 companies have done it. So perhaps the question is, what about larger companies? What are they doing about resiliency and ESG? Are they doing, how much is enough? Where do we stop? You know, what is the expectation? It sounds like the problem is so big. What can we do? I started my journey in ESG, spending time in hinterland palm oil plantations, next generation EV vehicle manufacturing hubs, F&B production spaces to tell you that companies large and small are doing it and doing it right. There are cases when it's not being done well. Is greenwashing happening, blue washing, all these things? Yes, it continues to happen. But the good news is when companies start setting targets, larger companies like this, when they have landfill-free locations, and this is where the work, ecosystem work of partners in NGOs, government, policymakers make that difference. Companies can make, when they make a zero-waste policy, it takes years to happen. It doesn't happen overnight. But when it happens, it definitely makes a difference. And why do companies do it? Because, you know, it's legislative requirement is one. But number 2, companies like this can show the data that they have saved money, they have become more productive and more efficient. And that's why it makes a difference for companies, and as a result, you build resilience. But my message also, as someone who has worked in this industry for so long, is the lower standards. You know, neoliberal capitalism is harsh. We know that. If a CEO doesn't meet targets, out you go. But in this industry, unfortunately, we are very happy with very little. You know, we always feel like, oh, this company has a report, fantastic, it's really good. So it's time to raise the game and set ourselves higher. Otherwise, let's not talk about the moon, we'll not be able to work towards anything. We don't have a plan B, yeah, with all the numbers that we have. So ultimately, my message is that climate resilient communities, the topic that we have is big, but it must be supported by bold corporate commitments. And if corporations, big and small, rise to the challenge, everyone will benefit. And we will have a better, more inclusive, more happier, more innovative world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jayanti. I think a great point there. We should correlate economic return of businesses through the focus on sustainability and pricing in circularity appropriately. Okay, with that, we will move into our Q&A session. Just a reminder that, you know, we will take questions from the floor, and for those online, you may put questions forward through Slido. So far, there's only one question online, so hopefully there'll be a few more coming in. I'll start off with the first question. And I'll address this to everyone, so I suppose each of you can take it from your own lenses. Perhaps we can start off with Ms. Husnaini from a social perspective, Architect Serena from the real estate perspective, and perhaps Dr. Jayanti, you touched a bit on food and agriculture, perhaps from that perspective. Now, when we talk about resilience, we think about robustness, we think about things being threat-proof, but most importantly, it is about being prepared for change. As architects Rina highlighted, it's not just about climate change, it's a changing climate. Okay, so how prepared is Malaysia, from your perspective, to these changes? And what are the challenges we face and potential opportunities to improve our resilience? Perhaps we can start with Ms. Husnaini.
How prepared are we? I think from the policy side, we have quite a good policy that that are aligned with, the aspiration to be resilient overall. When we are resilient overall, we are also, taking care and link it with the climate change. But implementation, I think the implementation part and the political will. Sometimes I observe, I hope I don't get kicked from this country. I observe that when we change the leadership, we also change the policies. Some policies are quite good, but they're not sustained. From a very distant observation, I compare sometimes Malaysia with Thailand. They changed their regime, their government many times. But some of their policies actually stays on, especially for the food production. Their agriculture. But I think we change when we have different leaders. So I think that is also something that we may want to, look at. In terms of, it's because Dr. Serena mentioned, Dr. Jayanti mentioned food security, how we produce food, actually links with, being resilient or how we want to be resilient. Yeah, we don't, if we don't manage our nature, and very interesting, we think sunshine is free, and to learn that we use the most water in the world, and that water is, one day we'll have war because of water, and in fact there are already war because of water, right? So these are the mindset that I think have to be cultivated, to be through education as well, make awareness so that the generation that comes, In terms of opportunities, I think I like what Dr. Serena mentioned, invest with the communities. And when we talk about climate change, about urbanization doesn't stand alone like an island. The urban-rural linkages determines our food security, determines our, even in terms of, how our level of heat and all that, it all relates. So urbanization, how we live our life, and Dr. Jayanti mentioned that, how we live our life, our everyday action determines also how resilient we are going to be in terms of adapting to the climate change. I don't know whether I answered you, but that's, what I can say right now.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Husnaini. Architect Serena?
I have to agree in being in this arena for a little bit of time, but I think being consistently inspired and not jaded to basically believe that we can make the change. I think the main thing I would have to say is, as ended in the talk by Dr. Jain, is raise the ambition. And don't be afraid to raise the ambition, because the rising of the ambition for resilience is important to safeguard our country anyway. So raising the ambition, and cities should raise their ambition, and because we are just too afraid to make that change and that shift and all the rest of it. So I think that would be the first thing I would have to say, and the main thing I would have to say, that working at the two levels is very, very important, and I think I've realized that we need to work more at the micro levels where actually the change can happen. I'm inspired by the Bangladesh bank, Dr. Yunus, where we trained as school girls to basically put solar on the roofs for the communities that don't have power. Can you imagine that? Schoolgirls, they're putting the solar panels on top of the roof. So what did we do in 2 steps? We raised their capabilities, we empowered them, and we empowered the community. So I think we're always thinking all the very big moves we can make, but there are also small actions that can be made, and learning from others very, very quickly what we can do about that, yeah.
So are we resilient enough? I'll talk from the perspective of companies, because that's where a lot of my work tends to be. Companies don't change, people change. So again, I am hopeful in terms of the intersection of technology, innovation, and how people in companies will rise to the challenge of ESG, simply because ESG presents an opportunity. We need to manage risk as organizations, whether you're a government policymaker or you're a company and you're running a large or small company, that's one. But number 2, the growth potential offered by ESG is really, this is the moment to seed it if you are running a company. And therefore, will we be able to build resilience in whatever industry, food production, for example? I'm hopeful. I'm not too, I don't have very positive things to say, because you say Thailand's got very consistent policies. I don't really, it doesn't matter which country has more policies, because what really matters is where's the innovation coming from. It can be a community organization driving that innovation, an NGO or a company. And if every organization, multiple organizations are doing that, I am hopeful that we will become more resilient than we currently are.
Actually, is a question I have for you, Dr. Jain. One is that I don't know if you noticed in the past 3 years, or I think mainly 3 years or 5 years, we're starting to see sustainable officers in every company. But do we have a resiliency? I've seen in 12 Malaysia Plan we have a resiliency chapter and area. Do we have resiliency officers? Because I'm seeing around the world that that's emerging, and do we have that resiliency and sustainability in the same, and it's recognized as an area in every city that is basically having to work at this? I haven't noticed that.
In terms of companies?
In terms of companies?
Yeah. I don't think that's quite there yet, or ESG or sustainability offices or departments in organizations. Once upon a time, I think it was corporate communications or corporate affairs, and it's just, hidden somewhere in a tower building. And today, the ESG practitioner is seen as part of C-suite, and it's becoming very important. The challenge, I think, with ESG is that as an industry, anybody can talk about data currently. So in terms of data sharing, ability to track data, assess data, and analyze data, it's not quite there yet for us to say we have ESG departments, the sustainability departments are starting to think about resiliency. Do they need to? Yes, they definitely need to, and it's very timely. I think government and policymakers and NGOs have started there. Companies, not yet, but is it time? Yes, definitely time. More in terms of data sharing. Companies like to collect ESG data, but they keep it to themselves. And that's quite pointless, because the more you share what you can share, we can build a better shared ecosystem.
Yes, thank you everyone. Yes, a collective effort indeed. So it's not just about government policies, it's about each and every one of us taking the necessary steps. As Dr. Jayanti mentioned, it's about understanding where you stand as well. Data may not be universally available, but we do understand that the climate is changing. There's no point doing business in a planet that ceases to exist. So we all have to do our part. All right. So there are a few questions that have come in from the Slido. Before that, is there anyone who would like to come up and ask a question? I think we'd prefer, yeah, over there. Thank you. Perhaps if you could ask your question and address it, and tell us who you'd like to address it to. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I just want to make an observation that maybe we haven't covered waste management and recycling in your discussion. And I just noted that we have lots of plastic bottles. Well, I think, yeah. And I don't know whether they're recyclable, but I was at a conference in a hotel the other day, and they had glass jugs of water on every table, no plastic at all. So I just make that observation and appreciate your comment. I'm Prof. Peter. Thank you.
Yes, that's why I didn't open my bottle of water, or else I'm complicit by drinking the water from the bottle. You touched about waste. I don't know enough about waste in terms of our management itself here. I think there's been very big moves to actually go to waste to energy. In one study that we were doing about the waste to energy, let's put it this way, the amount of waste that we are actually emitting out, something in really big amounts. People like Singapore, obviously limited land, they do waste to energy. But the ppm in terms of the air quality that comes out, let's not talk about the leachate, we will definitely have some leachate, is quite low. When we were discussing it with the waste to energy guys, it's lower than what is from the exhaust of your car. So there is a very, still not a very good, in terms of Malaysians thinking about doing waste to energy or micro waste to energies, but I think that we're coming to the point that our landfills are really not handling the waste, and that they are getting cleaner and cleaner in dealing with waste to energy, and that may be something that we really have to consider, especially in big cities.
I'll just quickly jump in. Waste is a problem, but also we work with a few waste companies that manage waste. And in the course of advisory, of course, waste, studying the waste hierarchy is a first part, but the next big innovation will come from waste. Any company, startup, small company that's looking at waste, you need to link it to circularity, to really moving from the think, make waste to reuse, reduce, and the whole circular notion. How do we do this? The innovation is going to be transformative and change how we live. Is the consumer demanding enough? No. So companies need to start thinking about it as a growth potential, and I feel that that will perhaps be where to go. When Henry Ford was asked why did he build when asked consumers what do you want, customers don't know what they want. They would have wanted faster carriages. Yeah. So when you present a new area, a new market, a new growth strategy, that will be where the opportunity lies, and I feel that waste will be that huge transition, and I see a lot of exciting things coming from that whole space in terms of using waste to manufacture new products and services.
Yes, yes, indeed. I think reducing waste is fundamentally what sustainability is about, and we get a lot of efficiencies from that. The more we get out of less, the better, and from a resource perspective, that is critical. Perhaps I will just run to one of the Slido questions, which all of you can chip into. In the interest of time, I think we can maybe only have one more question after that. This is a good one. I think we've talked a lot about government and businesses, etc. But what can individuals, the man on the street, do? What part can they play? All right. Maybe we can start with Ms. Husnaini.
Bring your water bottle. Bring your own water bottle. Yeah, I think awareness raising about the impact of climate, the impact of urbanization in our everyday life, I think will make people realize that, hopefully, make people realize about, what will be the result of their action. Like I work with, I mentioned just now, I work with many poor urban communities, unfortunately not exactly in Malaysia, but I did work when I was in Penang. But we asked urban poor communities, especially the women, to actually tell us what, in terms of mapping the heat, mapping the impact of the heat as well, mapping the impact of climate change. For them, what is climate change? So we asked these poor urban women, and they said, okay, now I cannot take nap in the house because of the temperature in the house. And these are poor people who live not in Malaysia, maybe in Malaysian slum areas or not so bad, but in other countries they live zinc houses and all that, right? So it's very, very hot. So it's like, I used to be able to take nap in the house in the afternoon. Now even during the cooler seasons, I can't do that. So what do I do? When we have more land or some land, we try to also grow trees and maintain those trees and so on. So, and also the action of our everyday life, like it starts with the community, it starts with the people, and we have to invest in them, in all of us, every action. We're talking about waste just now. How many hotels now do not give small toiletries? Because that also contribute, and you give small soap, These are all, like Dr. Jayanti mentioned, the secular. And if we don't use them as consumer, if we don't use them, they will not give it to us. They will change also their practice. And we can also give suggestion to, companies and, services that we use. We can also use them. When we talk about climate change and the impact and bringing resiliency and all that, many of us are very fortunate, actually. You live in houses that have maybe air-conditioned and all that, but think about half of the population who don't have that as well. So our action in our home, who are fortunate enough to have those services, those amenities, we have to also think about them, because what we do will also, the act that we take on also impact them. But I really want to support and say this again and again, and I'm very glad that Dr. Sarina mentioned this, is community action at the local level. Yeah, be it our own, like, you know, when we work and live in a community, your condominium, your housing area, you know, you have resident association. How do the resident association also, you know, contribute and take action to build our climate resilience? So I think that's all I can say.
Thank you.
We had somebody from Malaysia go out to do a study in, I think it was 2 buildings in Japan under the UN, engineer C.K. Tang. One had very energy efficiency done to the building. The other one didn't. But the other one changed their habit. They switched off their lights, they collected their waste, they did all the other things. Guess what? The performance of that second building was just as good as the first building, without doing all the energy efficiencies and changing your LEDs and all the rest of it. And it had to do with habit. They changed their mindset about how they use a space. How many of you are going on the weekends and taking your recycling to be recycled? How many of you stop consuming at least 30%? With the internet and during the pandemic, everybody was buying everything online. But it's actually habit. And we have to change our habit, for example, on how we use water. In Penang, I wash my car every day. I have 3 showers. My son takes 15 minutes in the shower, I take 3. It's habit. So there is an amount that we can already reduce up to 40 to 50% in just our habit, without having to do too many things. So I basically is a proponent of changing the way we value things. I think that's probably it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's so well said. I can't add any more to that. You know, it is just what we already do, and I wish, you know, I think it's just to be more conscious. I think if I look at the value map of my life, there are areas that I can improve as well. You know, one major thing you can do is eat less meat, perhaps in terms of emissions factors that's caused by agriculture, for example. Not very popular. I tried to enforce it in the office, and I was treated quite not very friendly way. But the point is, we can do what we can.
But Dr. Jaya, in Paris, in all the kindergartens, they have only 1 day of meat. For the kindergarten, they provide food to the kindergartens. You know, you go to school in Paris, actually food is provided to you. They've actually changed that habit as well.
No, my 14-year-old son is vegetarian, and because he's watched all these Netflix shows, he's looked online and he realizes that not just is meat affecting the environment, but it's better for him as an athlete to eat more plant-based food. So I think the younger generation give me hope, as we shared this morning. We probably will learn more from our children than ourselves, but we do need to be very critical about our practices. And I am also, you know, I don't want to be proselytizing when I myself have areas that I need to improve. We are all on a journey.
Indeed, we are all on a journey. There's quite a few questions here on energy transition, etc. I think once again we can reiterate efficiency. Energy efficiency in particular is critical to reducing our carbon emissions. Every unit of energy that we save at the consumer end has the potential to reduce or negate the need for 3 to 4 units of primary fuel. So the power of the individual is really, really strong. As we move towards electrification, you know, YB Nick Nazmi talked earlier about electrifying transport. We've got more and more data centers coming in, etc. The need to build new power plants is becoming more and more crucial. But in the process, how we use it efficiently is perhaps more important. All right, so I hope that covers some of those questions. Since it's the organizers mentioned, we've only got another 6 or 7 minutes. So perhaps I'll just pass it around to your parting thoughts. Each of you can just give a quick summary of your presentations, 1 to 2 minutes each for your parting thoughts before we close. Thank you. Perhaps we can start in reverse order this time. Dr. Jayanti? Yeah.
So I started with companies, what companies can do. I suppose a nice way to end it would be what can consumers do? And if you're a consumer, how to transform or change that ecosystem would be to vote with your wallet. And that's a very powerful wallet. And if we have the activist ways to buy less, but buy better, be more responsible in how you consume, how you purchase, and the companies you support. That will make all the difference in transforming the ESG landscape. And by virtue of that, again, we get the cities we deserve. As a community, we need to build those cities. And Alice Waters is one of those early proponents of farm to table, and she says, cities get the restaurants they deserve, or the food they deserve. That's why we laugh at Singapore, and we're very proud of being Malaysian. But we also get that if we want to be really resilient communities and build resilient cities, we need to demand of it from our policymakers, from our NGOs, from the companies, and hopefully we get the cities we deserve. That's my parting thought.
I don't think I have very much to say. I think just, action things now, that's all. You're all in a capacity to action something. You talked about, if you're in an apartment building, you want to bring your energy down, you change and make your building more energy efficient, and it's also saving to your wallet. So I just want to leave you one parting word, and that is the ROI on sustainability. It's not 10 years or 8 years or whatever. It's as little as 1 year or 3 years, the ROI. And then you're actually making profit. So there is profit to be made in sustainability and resilience. So don't think of it as a sort of negative, oh, I need to be more resilient and it's going to be something else. There's actually money to be made. So the younger generation don't think of it in that kind of way, and neither should you. So, yeah, just change that.
I think, for me, I think we shouldn't take things for granted. We shouldn't take, if you live comfortably now, don't take that for granted, because we need to also improve the way that we do things, because sometimes what we have abundance before may not necessarily have them in the future because of the way we live our life. Not taking care of the environment, not conscious about so many things. And I totally agree with Dr. Jayanti, what she says about being consumer, being a user. We have the power to change, and it's in our hands. Thank you.
Okay, with that, thank you very much to the panel. I certainly learned a lot. I hope all of you did as well. I think just before I finish, just an interesting observation I'd like to point out. I was with Serena on the World Green Building Council's judging panel for awards, right? And they had this award category for women in sustainability. But this year is the last year they're going to do it, because next year onwards they said we don't need that because there's so many women in sustainability now. Yeah? There's no need to have a separate award for it. And kudos to the women. I think we need a lot more female leadership, akin to Mother Nature. Nothing like a women's style of thinking to drive us out of this crisis. So thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you to the moderator and speakers. As we conclude this session, I would like to invite Mr. Azlan Abdullah MIM Board of Directors, accompanied by Mr. Kabinesh Eliatambi, to the stage for the plaque presentation to our esteemed speakers and moderator.